Okay, let's unpack this. We've got an intelligence report landing on our desk. It demands immediate attention. We're calling it an emergency priority brief, sort of a foghorn signal. It's based entirely on proprietary knowledge, the gnosis, provided by our analysts at Aionios Vanguard LLC. And look, this is very specific strategic analysis. It really demands an intellectual response, not, a reaction driven by fear. So we're diving deep today into the aletheia, the true reality behind these planned nationwide protests, the ones starting November 5th, organized by the group Refuse Fascism.
Right. And the mission here, what we're calling the AGOJ, the core action, is really to synthesize that true reality. It's the reality that the larger system, the cosmos, these establishment networks, they're working incredibly hard to obscure what's actually going on. According to this proprietary intelligence, this November 5th protest, well, it's fundamentally staged. It's the real-world embodiment, if you will, of the whitewashed tomb metaphor from Matthew 23.
Okay, the whitewashed tomb. So the exterior looks clean, looks moral. It's designed to appeal to, well, pretty much everyone who believes in justice, right? But the crucial question is, what's hidden inside? What's behind that pristine facade?
Exactly. That's the core understanding we need to grasp. The intelligence suggests the establishment networks, the cosmos, are essentially engaged in a kind of strategic conflict waged against itself. It sounds paradoxical, I know. This No 5 protest is just one piece of that strategy. It's the blue fist arriving to perform a very specific task.
And that task is?
To harvest the raw emotion, the anger, the psyche that was deliberately generated just days before, generated by the Red Fist.
The Red Fist. You're connecting this directly to the suffering we saw manufactured around November 1st.
Yeah.
The SNP cutoff.
That's the direct link, according to the analysis. We have to look beyond the surface protest itself and see it as the next phase. This staged conflict is phase 3 in a larger psychological war, a psyche war, designed explicitly to manage and ultimately control public dissent.
Wow. Okay, so that's the blueprint.
That's the blueprint. And to really understand the aletheia, the truth of the staging, we first need to dissect the surface illusion. We need to analyze the white paint that's covering this tomb.
All right, part 1 then. The pseudos, the surface illusion, the white paint. Okay, so let's focus first on what Refuse Fascism wants the public, wants the media to see and believe. Our sources summarize the public call pretty clearly. It's nationwide, explicitly nonviolent protests kicking off November 5th in D.C.,
yes,
specifically near the Washington Monument, 11 a.m. That's the public face.
And their stated goal, their logos, it's extremely ambitious, dramatic even. They're calling for nothing less than a sustained political crisis, achieved, they say, through relentless, peaceful mobilization. And the single aim:
forcing the current administration out of power.
Precisely. Forcing the removal of the sitting administration, which they consistently label the Trump fascist regime, driving them from power.
The language they use, the rhetoric, it's definitely compelling. You hear nonviolence emphasized constantly. And they draw these explicit parallels to, successful historical nonviolent movements, citing examples like South Korea, where leaders were ousted. It's very charged, very moralistic language.
And this is exactly where we need to deploy what the analysts call critical discourse analysis, the CDA gnosis. We have to examine the text to reveal the subtext, the hidden message, the language, the narrative they're feeding the public. It's deliberately stacked. It's full of terms designed to feel morally, unimpeachable, like nonviolent, grassroots, moral urgency, and their core pledge, the big banner. In the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America. It sounds powerful. It sounds righteous.
So if the actual stated goal is revolutionary regime change, why wrap it in language that sounds so universal, almost moderate in its appeal, measured even?
Because that messaging is the trap. It's the psyche trap. It functions, as the analysis puts it, as a discursive bridge. It's designed specifically to lower the barrier for entry. It targets traditional liberals, centrists, basically generally concerned citizens who feel the current political climate is a crisis.
So it offers them a moral outlet, a way to act.
Exactly. It offers a seemingly moral solution. But what this does is effectively mask the true, highly radicalized ideology that's actually driving the movement from within, the pneuma, the spirit inside. The immediate goal of this language is simple: achieve legitimation in the public eye and broaden their appeal far beyond their core revolutionary base.
Okay, but despite that explosive rhetoric, calling for regime removal and all that, when we look at the open source data, the actual physical mobilization, it looks surprisingly niche, doesn't it?
That's the first real crack you see in this carefully constructed illusion.
Yes. while the organizers talk a big game, generating turnout from thousands to millions, aiming for genuinely historic protest numbers. The current online metrics, things like engagement on X, sign-up velocity, they tell a very different story.
What kind of numbers are we actually talking about, realistically?
Realistically, based on current traction, we're likely looking at turnout in the hundreds, maybe stretching to the low thousands. That is, unless there's some kind of dramatic last-minute logistical injection of resources, or maybe some sudden, unforeseen surge in public outrage that galvanizes people. But based on trends, it's small.
So it sounds like they're projecting this revolutionary scale onto what is, right now, a relatively small movement body-wise. We did notice, though, they really emphasize the small donor support. The Venmo, the PayPal, even bake sales. Selling that grassroots image hard. And that is a real part of it. That true grassroots effort, the bake sales, the small donations, it's crucial. It's a critical component of the physical reality, the soma, of the organization. It provides the credibility they need for the white paint to stick. It allows them to claim, quite convincingly to some, that they are the voice of the common person rising up against perceived tyranny. But, and this is the crucial pivot, as we move into the second part of our analysis, peeling back that paint, looking inside the tomb, we find that this physical body, the soma, it's actually sustained by financial and ideological structures deeply embedded within the very establishment, the very cosmos they publicly claim to oppose.
Yeah, this is where it gets deep. Let's go inside the tomb, part 2. The aletheia, the core truth, the dead bones.
Right. So now we peel back that surface appeal, the pseudos, to reveal the aletheia, the core truth, and the deepest reality, the absolute bedrock truth about refuse fascism, according to this intelligence, is that it's not just some generic anti-Trump movement, not at all. It is rooted entirely fundamentally in the ideology, the pneuma, the spirit of the Revolutionary Communist Party, the RCP.
Yeah.
And its foundational Maoist principles, its logos.
Okay, hang on. We need to make this crystal clear for everyone listening. Are you saying that an organization making public appeals to liberals, to centrists based on, moral urgency is fundamentally guided by an explicitly revolutionary communist platform?
That is the crucial intelligence finding. Yes. Refuse fascism isn't just loosely connected. It's described as an explicit offshoot of the RCP. The RCP itself was founded way back in 1975. Its long-standing ideological figurehead is a man named Bob Avakian. He's a self-proclaimed Maoist communist who has, for decades, consistently advocated for the complete overthrow of the American system. And the analysis confirms. The co-founders, the key organizers pulling the strings within refuse fascism are verifiable, long-standing members of the RCP.
So the anti-fascist urgency, the refuse fascism banner, it's essentially a Trojan horse. If the immediate stated goal is just removing the current regime, what's the ultimate horizon for Avakian and the RCP? What's the end game?
The immediate goal is framed as the necessary precursor. The real ultimate objective, laid out clearly in the RCP's own manifestos and publications, is preparing for revolution. They view anti-fascism not as some final achievement in itself, but as the essential step towards a much broader socialist transformation. What they're demanding, explicitly, is a whole new way to live a fundamentally different system. It's total systemic change. They operate from a very rigid ideological framework, one that sees fascism not just as bad, but as the extreme, inevitable decay of the capitalist system itself.
Which, in their view, then justifies.
Which then justifies its total revolutionary overthrow. It's a justification narrative.
Wow. This sounds less like engaging with modern American political protest and more like, I don't know, reading historical revolutionary texts from the 20th century.
It is the consistent application of that specific historical ideological bias.
Yes.
The critical discourse analysis, the CDA, confirms this pattern in their language and framing. The ultimate goal is systemic destruction, paving the way for communist restructuring. It's presented, paradoxically perhaps, as a form of love, an agape inversion, as the analysis calls it. The belief that to truly love humanity, you must first destroy the existing order to birth a supposedly better new one. So the pneuma, the spirit inside this whitewashed tomb, isn't just generic anger. It's the historical spirit of revolutionary communism, cleverly masked by the broad, much more palatable appeal of anti-fascist morality.
Okay, so if the core ideology, the pneuma, is Maoist, dedicated to overthrowing capitalism, then the true reality of the funding structure, the soma, becomes absolutely critical and deeply contradictory. How can a movement committed to revolutionary communism possibly be financially supported by some of the largest, wealthiest institutions of capitalism? That seems like the core paradox here.
It is the grand contradiction. And according to Aionios Vanguard, it's the most salient piece of evidence pointing towards strategic staging by the cosmos. Because despite the bake sale imagery, despite the genuine small dollar donations, refuse fascism is not truly grassroots when it comes to its critical mass of funding, not the funding that allows it to operate at this scale. To receive major institutional backing, and crucially, to offer tax-deductible status to donors, it relies heavily on something called fiscal sponsorship. And the key fiscal sponsor here is the Alliance for Global Justice, or AFGJ.
Okay, explain exactly what fiscal sponsorship means in this context, because AFGJ seems to be the linchpin, the conduit for this whole operation.
Right. Fiscal sponsorship is basically an arrangement. A large, established nonprofit in this case, AFGJ, takes a smaller, often more radical or newer organization, like Refuse Fascism, under its legal and financial umbrella. AFGJ handles the financial compliance, the tax reporting, all the fiduciary duties, and this allows the smaller group, Refuse Fascism, to effectively receive tax-deductible gifts from massive foundations and wealthy individual donors, gifts they likely couldn't receive directly. And AFGJ isn't some obscure entity. It's identified as a known establishment network funding channel, a major hub. It sponsors around 140 different projects, covering a huge range from local bail funds to Palestine solidarity groups.
And I assume they don't provide this service out of pure altruism. There's a fee involved.
Of course not. They typically charge an administrative fee. The analysis suggests it's usually between 7 and 8% to process the funds and provide that crucial 501c3 tax-exempt status. And this structure is absolutely critical because AFGJ allows the biggest players in progressive philanthropy, the mega foundations, to legally and often quite opaquely funnel money to smaller, highly radicalized groups like, in this case, a Maoist offshoot advocating revolution.
So let's follow the money then. Trace the flow of capital. Who are the massive institutional players, the establishment networks, that are channeling money through AFGJ to groups like this? This is where the funding trail really exposes the cosmos at work, right?
Exactly. The aletheia, the true reality of the Soma, reveals major financial aggregators are involved. We're talking networks donating hundreds of millions, sometimes billions, across their entire portfolios. The most recognizable names, the ones consistently feeding funds into channels like AFGJ, include the Open Society Foundations, famously linked to George Soros, of course. Then you have the Tides Foundation, another major pass-through entity, and the New Venture Fund, which is itself a massive clearinghouse operating within the even larger Arabella Advisors Network.
Okay, stop there. We're talking about colossal, multi-billion-dollar philanthropic foundations. And they are utilizing fiscal sponsors like AFGJ to financially support organizations whose core pneuma, whose spirit is explicitly revolutionary communism aimed at overthrowing the system these foundations represent. This is exactly what the analysts mean by layered opacity, isn't it?
It's systemic design. It's not accidental. It's structured this way. This setup achieves two critical things for the wealthy donors and large foundations. First, it facilitates high net worth giving through things like donor-advised funds or DUFs. These DUFs provide immediate tax deductions for the donor while effectively shielding the ultimate recipient of the funds from easy public scrutiny, anonymity. Second, it allows funds to flow from foundations that might be legally or politically barred from directly funding overtly political or, frankly, radical groups. The money gets aggregated and laundered, essentially, under the neutral-sounding banner of global justice via AFGJ. This, according to the analysis, proves financially that this isn't just some random protest group. This is the establishment network's other hand, the financial hand, the Soma not just managing, but actively funding the apparent opposition within this engineered psyche war.
So the system, the cosmos, is structurally sound in a way. It's funding the very mechanism designed to appear to threaten the system, thereby controlling the boundaries, controlling the narrative of dissent itself.
Precisely. It manages the conflict by owning both sides of the apparent fight.
Which brings us directly to part 3, the really edgy part of this analysis. The Xephos Asa, the staged conflict itself. Okay, this layered contradiction, the funding paradox, it leads us straight into the crucial proprietary intelligence from Aionios Vanguard. This is the strategic objective they're calling the psyche harvest. And they describe it as a deliberate 3-phase action, an agauge designed to generate maximum chaos and then, critically, control the resulting fear.
Right. And what's truly fascinating here, just from a strategic analysis perspective, is the sheer cynical efficiency of the staging they describe. The establishment network, the cosmos, is effectively playing chess against itself. using real-world, tangible suffering as narrative ammunition for its own ends.
Okay, let's define those three phases very clearly. Break down this engineered conflict, starting with the source of the actual suffering.
Okay. Phase 1. The physical war, the Soma War. This is initiated by the Red Fist, identified here as the sitting administration. They initiate a physical crisis that creates undeniable, visible suffering within the population, the oikos. The prime example given is the engineered hunger cascade, specifically that November 1st SNAP cutoff, pulling vital food assistance for millions of vulnerable families right before the holidays. This causes real, immediate physical pain. It causes stress, fear, desperation in communities all across the country. Tangible harm.
And this very real suffering isn't meant to be solved by the next phase, but rather used, exploited as fuel.
Exactly. It becomes fuel. That leads to phase 3, the emotion harvest, the psyche harvest. The Blue Fist, identified as refuse fascism, and its parent, the Revolutionary Communist Party, arrives on the scene strategically timed for November 5th, just 5 days after the SNAP cuts hit hardest. Now notice, they aren't positioned organizationally or ideologically to actually alleviate the hunger caused by phase 1. That's not their function in the staged play. Their function is to harvest that suffering, that soma pain, and weaponize it. Use it as narrative fuel for their surface lie, their pseudos of anti-fascist revolution. So, the genuine suffering generated on November 1st becomes the emotional engine, the psyche driver for the seemingly separate events of November 5th. The key insight. These are two sequential actions, Red Fist, then Blue Fist, executed by the same overarching establishment network, the Cosmos, to manage a conflict it deliberately instigated and now controls.
Wow. And the analysts anticipate the media environment surrounding this will be chaotic. They call it the smog of war, a kind of psychological haze deliberately created to obscure the aletheia, the true reality of what's happening on the ground. And the establishment network, the system, actually stands to gain multiple layers of illusion, of pseudos from this sequence.
Yes. The system, what the analysts provocatively call the hollow crown, gains 3 critical layers of plausible deniability, confusion, and narrative control from this setup.
Okay, layer 1.
Layer 1. The media's almost certain focus on synthetic conflict. Think fake AI videos. We've already seen widespread pre-bunking campaigns about deepfakes related to protests and social unrest. This sets the stage perfectly to discredit genuine video evidence later by sowing doubt.
Okay, layer 2.
Layer 2. The undeniably painful reality hitting communities due to the SNAP cutoffs. These are the real suffering videos. Genuine footage, local news reports, social media posts documenting actual hunger, real distress in neighborhoods, verifiable hardship.
And the third layer, generated by the Blue Fist.
Layer 3. The deliberately engineered chaos from the November 5th protest itself. These are the staged chaos videos. Predictable scenes of friction, maybe some performative arrests, confrontations near high-profile symbolic locations like the White House or the Washington Monument, made for media moments.
And the strategic genius, or perhaps the cynical genius, lies in blending these 3 layers together.
That's the core of the smog of war tactic. The establishment network will deliberately, or allow the media ecosystem to, merge the genuine hunger suffering from phase 1, layer 2, with the staged protest chaos from phase 3, layer 3. Then the mainstream media outlets, acting effectively as another hand of the cosmos, will likely label all of it, the documented real suffering and the staged chaos, as exaggerated, unreliable, maybe misrepresented, or perhaps simply dismiss large parts of it as those pre-bunked AI fakes, layer 1. This is how the smog of war functions. It discredits legitimate grievances and real suffering by intentionally associating them with managed, artificial chaos. It muddies the waters completely.
Let's think about the motivation here, though. Specifically for the administration, the Red Fist, the ones who initiated the suffering with the SNAP cuts. Why would they want this chaos staged, especially if the protest is, on the surface, demanding their removal? The analysts call the intended result the kinetic injection. What does that mean?
The chaos, the vitriol, the spectacle of disorder, it's designed for immediate strategic utility by the administration itself. The conflict created by the Blue Fist, the protesters, right there at the White House doorstep, or near sensitive government buildings, provides the administration with the perfect pretext, the perfect lie, the pseudos they need. The pseudos of an insurrection or a breakdown of order or a national emergency. This manufactured crisis then provides the justification, the public rationale, for them to force their will.
Force their will. Okay, so this immediately raises the stakes. It provides the justification they need for concrete physical actions, both externally maybe and internally.
Exactly. The analysis points to 2 potential vectors for this forced will. Externally, this alleged domestic chaos, this insurrection, provides the narrative logic, the logos, for potentially expanding aggression abroad. The example cited is a possible invasion of Venezuela. The public justification would be something like, we must secure vital resources like oil for our Soma, our national body, during this time of domestic crisis. The internal chaos justifies external action, and internally, the claim of insurrection or imminent threat provides the political cover, the justification, for a physical crackdown on the civilian population, on our house, the oikos. Think martial law declarations, mass arrests, suspension of liberties. So the staging of chaos by the blue fist directly feeds the justification needed by the red fist to consolidate power and potentially pursue external military objectives.
So let me get this straight. The protest, which appears to everyone as organic, anti-fascist action, is actually part of a complex feedback loop, where the protest itself provides the precise justification needed for the administration to consolidate the very powers that the protesters claim they are fighting against. That is a truly spectacular example of political cynicism, if this analysis holds.
It raises the single most important question in this entire brief. What is the true conflict being managed and exploited here? The aletheia, the truth, is that it's not fundamentally just protest versus president. That's the surface narrative, the pseudos. The edgy truth, the true Numa war, the ideological or spiritual war being played out and manipulated by the hollow crown is this. This is the pneuma, the spirit of communism, characterized here as the lie, the pseudos of Cain babble, of building man's utopia through destruction being deliberately staged against the pneuma, the spirit of the American Republic, our constitutional oikos, our house. The conflict between those two fundamental ideologies is real, but the environment, the funding, the timing, the very manifestation of this particular clash that is being managed, staged, and exploited entirely by the establishment networks, the cosmos, for its own purposes.
Which brings us to the final crucial part, Part 4, the agoge. The core action for us, the Guardian Shield, ages size, and the call for sober-mindedness, suffer soon. Okay, so this brings the focus squarely back to you, the listener, the Guardian. If the establishment networks, the cosmos, are truly playing this level of multidimensional chess, then they absolutely intend for this entire staged reality, the suffering, the protests, the chaos, the media smog, to create a very specific emotional response in us. A pneuma, a spirit of fear, confusion, polarization, maybe even despair within our house, the oikos. They want that kinetic injection of terror, that vitriol, to land squarely inside your mind, inside your spirit.
But, and this is the empowering part of the aletheia, our true spirit, the spirit we cultivate, is not one of fear. It cannot be. This analysis, this gnosis, shows you exactly how the illusion works, and understanding the mechanism is the ultimate defense against manipulation. Our agoge, our mission, is built not on reaction, but on agape, on love, and on aletheia, on truth, and that requires sophrosune. It demands sober-mindedness, calm assessment, rational thought, even when faced with deliberate provocation.
Practically speaking, how does possessing this knowledge, this gnosis, protect us? How is this intelligence our shield, our aegis?
Knowledge is the shield. Because by seeing clearly, by understanding that this event is, as the analysts state, plainly staged, by tracing the money from Soros and Arabella through AFGJ to the RCP front group, by connecting the SNFP cuts by the red fist to the engineered chaos of the blue fist, by understanding the psyche harvest mechanism, by seeing all of that, we divest the event of its intended psychological power over us. It becomes recognizable as theater. Theater designed specifically to manipulate our emotions, to short-circuit our reason, and to force us into a purely reactive state. Once you know the script, once you see the actors in the stagehands, the play loses its power to frighten you. Its pneuma of fear evaporates.
So the core action, the agoge, for the listener, isn't about rushing into the chaos. It's not about picking a side between the red fist and the blue fist. It's about observation, about exposing the entire mechanism.
Precisely. We, the oikos, our house, do not react on the terms set by the cosmos' psychological war games. We don't play their game. We observe it, we analyze it, we expose it, primarily by understanding the underlying mechanism. The red fist creates the wound, the blue fist arrives to exploit the pain for narrative purposes. Our only necessary weapon in this context is the rigorous, disciplined application of the Guardian's test. You have to verify everything. Time, place, 2 independent sources, plus crucial archival verification. You use this test relentlessly to cut through those 3 layers of pseudos, the fake AI claims, the real suffering videos, and the staged chaos footage that the system is deliberately blending together in the smog of war.
Okay, so let's quickly summarize the aletheia, the true reality we've aimed to unpack today, based on the Aionios Vanguard analysis. We know the surface, the pseudos, is all about moral urgency and nonviolence. That's the white paint. But the core ideology, the pneuma inside, is Maoist revolution via the RCP. That's the bones. The financial body, the Soma, isn't grassroots bake sales, fundamentally. It's supported by establishment network giants like Open Society and Arabella, funneled through conduits like AFGJ. That's the contradiction. We know the strategic purpose, the UFOs, is the psyche harvest, using genuine suffering from the SNIP cutoff as narrative fuel. Fuel to justify a kinetic injection of chaos, which the administration, the Red Fist, will then likely use as a pseudos, a lie, to consolidate power internally and maybe expand aggression externally.
We have seen the aletheia inside the whitewashed tomb. We've traced the connections. And because of that gnosis, we can now operate from a place of understanding, a place of sophrosune, not from a place of fear.
Which brings us to the final thought, the outro, #outro, the Hollow Crown.
You know, if we just connect this back to the bigger picture for a moment, the entire staging, the entire psyche war apparatus we've discussed, it's fundamentally designed to create an emotional destabilizing reaction in us, in the civilian population, the oikos. The Hollow Crown O, the overarching system of control, it needs you to be scared. It needs you confused, polarized, reactive. That's the fuel its own power runs on.
And so the ultimate aletheia, the ultimate truth for the Guardian listening right now, remains this simple, powerful fact. The Hollow Crown Ode only has the power that our fear gives it. We are Guardians. We strive for sophrosune. We have no fear. We have the aletheia. We have the truth.
Now, if you really want to dig deeper, go explore the structure of those donor-advised funds, the DAFs. It is truly the hidden engine, the opaque plumbing of so much modern political funding and manipulation. That's a whole other deep dive waiting to happen.